Hello, welcome back. We are talking about the moral law, looking for universal moral principles. Last time we talked about value and talent. Now we want to talk about truth and justice. And what is the connection between truth and justice? What is truth? Have you ever thought about that? And how are they connected? Truth is something that we really avoid these days. I don't mean truth like in general. I just mean the topic. Philosophically, we tend to think we can't know the truth. Truth is what corresponds with reality. And if we're a skeptic, then we think we can't know what is true. And I don't know about you, but it does seem like truth needs to make a comeback. We are told so many different things when we turn on the television and watch the news, all these different stories. How do we know what is true? How do we know what is according to reality? So truth is something we need to really work on in terms of valuing truth. And we also live in a time where social justice is something we highly value. But you can't have justice without truth. So we need to see what is the connection between these two. If you jettison truth, then you can't have justice. What you will have, though, is a power struggle. One powerful group battling another powerful group. And I think that's what we see a lot in the public sphere today. So how could we fix that? How can we get better at being a society that values what is just and true? So let's look at this moral law. How is this rooted in human nature? We are born equal. Is that true? We're equally human. We're equally human insofar as we're rational animals. In justice, equals are to be treated equally. Humans are to be treated as humans. Now, there are things which are unequal, but at the root level, we are equally human beings. And we talked about human dignity. We should be treated as human beings with human dignity. Rational animals with the capacity and the responsibility for understanding. Some of the points under the nature of truth and justice. Let's draw these out. Ultimate justice, so justice on a cosmic scale, is ontological. It has to do with our being. And it has to do with this. If you use reason, then you will find meaning. If you don't use reason, then you won't find meaning. Okay, that's ontologically. That's the way human beings are. And the consequences of the failure to use reason are inherent by the kinds of being that we are. So there's a sense in which justice is a metaphysics too, is connected to metaphysics. If God exists and human beings have turned their back on God, it would be just for God to turn his back on human beings and leave them in this condition of no meaning because they didn't use their reason. But there's this concept of grace that restores humans to the use of reason. By God's grace, we can use reason. So that's the cosmic ultimate level of things. Ontological level, but really it's in this: no reason, no meaning. Reason, then meaning. And if we're not using our reason and we're not finding meaning, grace is what restores us to the use of reason. But you could disagree with me, that's fine. Now, let's talk about social justice. Social justice is the justice between human beings living in society. So we are political animals. We must live in societies, and we want to have a principle where equals in society are treated equally. Relevant equals are treated equally. And the relevant equality is we're human beings. We're rational animals. So we can talk about social justice is first distributive. Distributive justice has to do with the distribution of talent. Everyone has talent. Talent is the place where we have an equal distribution. We don't have an equal distribution of money or fame or power. So we do have this idea of privilege. Some people have more privilege than others in terms of social capital, but we all have talent. Okay, now we don't all have the same level of opportunity to develop talent. So this is where we could work for that. We could work for social justice insofar as we want everyone to have the opportunity and the ability to develop their talent in pursuit of the good. So that's where we could work on social justice in one sense, in this privilege sense. Social justice is also, once we have distribution, contractual. We could make contracts with one another, and it's based on distribution. So you've contracted with the school to take this class, and I have contracted with the school to teach the class. If I break my contract, then there will be legal retribution or problems, right? So that's the third level, retributive justice. And this is where we collect on violations of contracts. So we have distributive justice, contractual justice, and retributive justice, all assuming social connections and exchanges of goods and services. And we could go further and talk about restorative justice and transformative justice. These are other theories in justice, the study of justice. And restorative justice is where we want to bring reconciliation between parties that have had a contractual break. So sometimes we need a mediator. So there are mediators in a legal sense, but there's also circumstances in which there was a criminal who did something terrible, perhaps stole from a family or a person, or even murdered someone. And that person needs to be restored to be forgiven and be accepted back into society. So we have ways of doing that. That's what restorative justice is. It's about making amends. It's about reparations or reintegration into society. And transformative justice has to do with peacemaking. So we want to be peacemakers in justice. How can we bring peace to let's say, a society that has been ravaged by war? In Africa, there have been tribal wars where those people have to live together afterwards and they need to be reconciled. So justice is also seeking amends, making things right between contractual breaks. And those could be violations of the moral law, like murder or theft, or some other way human dignity has been violated. So we do have ways of fixing it. So I'm bringing this to your attention because sometimes students are really into justice studies, and I'm bringing to your attention that you can do a lot more in this area. Now, how can we bring about social justice, full social justice? Two ways: preventative and corrective justice. Preventative is by speaking the truth. If you want to prevent social inequalities, social injustice, harm, speak the truth. Always speak the truth, and the relevant truth at the right time in the right place. You have to have wisdom in speaking the truth. And corrective justice is where we have to make things right. So we might have to take legal recourse. We might have to do mediation. I mean, what about friends? When some friend has done something to harm another friend, it's not always a legal thing, right? You might have to have a mediator, someone to help you resolve the dispute. Okay, so preventative and corrective. Speaking the truth, we'll talk more about that as we go along here. Now, it says truth is necessary and sufficient for justice. Think about this. Usually justice is connected to courts of law, right? And in the court of law, we have to speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God, in order to bring about a faithful witness, to see that the truth comes out so we can get justice, right? But truth isn't only spoken in the court of law. It should be spoken in our day-to-day life, every day. So truth is necessary for justice, and if we spoke the truth, it would be good enough for justice. Because if we knew the truth and we spoke the truth, we would do the truth, and we wouldn't do things that are unjust. So you can see how this is a moral application. To have justice, one must know the truth and speak the truth. And this is what I just said. Justice in a court of law requires us to speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And full justice requires knowing and speaking the whole truth. So not just in this case, but the whole truth. And knowing the whole truth is a function of the whole of one's life. So the truth is a way of life, and a life that is concerned with truth will also bring about justice. I can give you an example from literature. Mark Twain has an essay, My First Lie and How I Got Out of It. And in this essay, he talks about his first lie was, I think, being stuck by a pin when he was a baby and crying. Well, he learned that if he cried, he would get attention. So his first lie was fake crying. And basically he's saying we're born into the world liars. And then he goes on to talk about the lie of his generation. And it's the lie of silent assertion. And the lie of silent assertion is where you go along with something that your society is doing that is unjust. And everyone tacitly agrees. And in his day, it was slavery. And no one spoke out against it. So the lie of silent assertion is going along with an injustice because we're not speaking truthfully about human beings. So in this case, in slavery, we are denying the dignity of other human beings. We're not speaking truthfully about their nature, and they are enslaved and used and treated as objects, which is wrong because that's not how you treat human beings, but no one was willing to say that, or they didn't believe it. So you can see that if we don't know the whole truth, and I'm talking about like a house, the house, if you don't have the epistemology that allows you to get to truth, the truth about ultimate reality and the origin and nature of humans, and what a human being is, then you won't live out the truth in your house. So this is really pointing us back to the importance of doing philosophy and doing it well and doing it publicly in society. So go read Mark Twain's My First Lie and How I Got Out of It. And you can see how this pattern of lying continues and oppresses through generations. What is the lie of silent assertion in our day? Do we know? I'll let you think about that. All right, what is the law for this one? The one we want to make a universal moral principle. We're to seek justice by knowing and speaking the truth. Do you want to make that a universal? I do. We are to seek justice by knowing and speaking the truth. Now let's talk about some of the applications. All right, so applications. The first one is this moral law is opposed to ignorance as excusable. So we've been talking about this idea that some things are clear to reason. The basic things are clear to reason. So those are the kinds of things we should know. And if we sought to know, we would know because we're rational beings and things are clear to reason. So we can't claim ignorance on the basic things. If we seek, we can know what is clear. And if we knew what was clear about ultimate reality, we could remove oppression that's justified by false worldviews. Now, this is going to be hard for us to think about because we live in a society that thinks nobody could really know, and everybody's got their own views. Nobody knows what's true. We can't say, that view is false and oppressive, but we're going to have to get some courage and say that, because some worldviews are oppressive, and they're oppressive because they don't speak the truth about human nature. Now, I'll give you one that's a little easier to see from where we are in the West, but maybe it's hard because we have to do philosophy to take it captive. How about the caste system in India? Are we willing to say that that's oppressive? The caste system is supported by a worldview that says this life isn't real. Nothing is real. And so the oppression that you feel isn't real. It's only because of your bad karma. And once you work off your karma, next time around, you'll have a better incarnation. And eventually you'll be released from the cycle of reincarnation. So you need to just do your duty in this life. And if that means you're on the bottom rungs of society, that just means you've done bad things in the past. So I'm willing to say that we should take that worldview seriously, and we should critique it and show where it doesn't match reality. There are others, though. So look at the next point. It's opposed to fideism. So I've been talking about skepticism, which says we can't really know the truth. Fideism also says we really can't know the truth, but we have to believe anyway. And there are many belief systems that are fideistic, based on belief without proof. So fideism is not knowledge, and it's not based on understanding. It declares what is believed to be true without answering objections. So it's declarative, and when pushed, there's no evidence, no reason to back up what's being claimed. So it nullifies its own testimony. Now think about this. If we were in the court of law, we were being questioned, grilled by a lawyer, and we said, well, I just believe it. It's just true for me. And we had no evidence. That would be thrown out of court. You can't just come and testify without having evidence. So you testify to what you have seen or what you have understood. So if you're going to testify to some belief system because you think we should go that way, then you should have evidence or reasons. We should demand evidence, reasons, proof from one another, and not let each other go by being fideistic. And you could be a fideistic naturalist or atheist materialist. You could be a fideistic religious person. You could fideistically believe in God or whatever religions people go for. So we owe it to one another to give each other reasons to testify to the truth and not to just what we think is true. Okay. That would prevent injustice. All right. It's opposed to privacy in decisions affecting public affairs. So in our society, there's a lot of special interests, back dealings that influence politicians and their decisions and making laws and spending tax dollars. So public affairs are influenced by private groups. And this is saying, no, if something affects the public, affects all of us, then there should be transparency in what's going on. Truth should be known if it's going to affect everyone. So it's opposed to privacy in decisions affecting public affairs. And this is, the public is the political, so particularly connected to the political. It's opposed to privacy for special interests to influence public decisions. So, I don't know, think about the past where special interest groups like the big tobacco has influenced public policy, and then they had to be sued later on because of the failure to disclose the harm of tobacco and how many people were harmed in that way. And there are other things going on now. People wonder about Monsanto and what's going on with the food supply. Anyway, I'll let you think about applications. All right, this moral law is opposed to restrictions on freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is freedom of rational discourse. Speech is words. Words express concepts. Concepts are the first act of reason. So if we're rational beings, we need the freedom to speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So free speech is really important if we're going to bring about justice. Now think about all these cases of the prohibition of free speech. So it's opposed to closed societies and restricted public forum and prohibited books. Right now this is going on. What about China? China is a closed society, and they've banned all the journalists from telling the truth about what's happening with the coronavirus. We need that information in order to prevent more death. But how do we get that information? So the freedom of speech is restricted, and then there's injustice that comes about because the truth isn't spoken. So think about restricted societies, North Korea, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Cuba. And now we have maybe even here in the United States, maybe the social media companies are trying to restrict speech. So this is a big issue. Should we allow people to say any and everything? No, we should allow people to speak the truth and defend the truth. And if they're saying things that aren't true, we should be free to oppose them with speaking the truth. So, all right, let's look at the next one. It's opposed to the abuse of the freedom of speech as the right of rational discourse. So sometimes people claim, I need to have my free speech, and what they're doing is not really speech. So hate and things here is opposed to slander, contempt, harassment, and incitement to violence. So these things aren't rational discourse. Slander is speaking falsehood against a person. Contempt is anger. It's an emotion. It's not reason. Harassment is use of force against a person. And incitement to violence is also force. So these aren't rational. This is not rational discourse. Sometimes we have imams who are speaking to incite people to violence. Sometimes we have flag burning, effigies, hate groups that are marching in the streets against people that are minority groups. So we need to think about what is speech, what is rational discourse, and what is not. So people aren't free to slander, harass, incite to violence. It's not rational discourse. And don't claim it as free speech. All right, another application is opposed to false advertising. Speaking what is false and selling things on false claims. So we need full disclosure. And there have been lots of things that have harmed people due to false advertising. It's opposed to profit making by withholding information, holding back possible harmful consequences from the product. Again, I think of things like DDT or Roundup, things that might be used on our food supply that cause people to become ill. And we don't know about it because they don't tell us about it. We have to discover this the hard way. The truth is hidden. So think about applications of this. If someone were going to sell you a car, should they disclose to you what's wrong with the car? Has it ever been in an accident? So full disclosure is important when we're selling things. I think one of the things we're worried about now is 5G. How is that going to affect us? And do we have any say in it? So yeah, you'll have faster phone speeds, but will it harm your health? So full disclosure, speaking the truth so that harm doesn't happen. Last application, it's opposed to public exposure of what is private. This happens on the internet a lot, doxing, releasing a person's personal information as a means of retaliation. So the one part was we need to have freedom of public discourse, but we also need freedom of privacy. Private things should be kept private. Public things should be made public, and we need to know the difference between those. So we have a right to privacy, and it's based on what is situational. So what is private is situational, and there's a right to privacy and an obligation to privacy for both spiritual and physical nakedness. So sometimes people fall into moral corruption, and it's a private matter. So keep it private. We don't need to know everybody's dirty laundry on the internet. And physical nakedness, people expose themselves. The porn industry is huge. Private, keep it private. We don't need to see that. So, yeah. So what is private is situational, and we have a right to privacy for situational things. And this takes wisdom. What to keep private and what is public, what affects the individual in the situation, and what affects the public and all of us. All right, that's a lot of applications. We could continue thinking of more. And as we see particular things in our society, we could think about how this moral law applies to those particulars. So what is the consequences of this moral law? On the negative side, an unfaithful witness, a person who doesn't speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth their whole life, shares in injustice and its consequences, like the lie of silent assertion. We share. If we don't speak the truth, we share in injustice and the consequences, harm. On the positive side, a faithful witness brings about justice. So if we speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, the relevant truth, all of our life, then we will bring about justice. This is how to bring justice. There's no other way to bring justice. All right, you may disagree with me, and that's fine. Drop me a line and let me know. Again, I'm just putting this out there for your consideration, for you to mull it over. Give me your best objections. Okay, so what did we cover just now? We covered the nature, the origin, nature, law, application, and consequence of the moral law on truth and justice. We're to seek justice by knowing and speaking the truth. Do you want to make that a moral absolute, a moral law? I do. Okay, next time we're going to talk about suffering. Ugh. Is suffering a universal? I think it is. All right, next time.